I thought I knew what a tough night shift was, but nothing prepared me for the haunted PA tiny diner. The bizarre, almost ritualistic rules I had to follow to survive each hour were insane. You won't believe what they make you do to keep the unseen forces at bay in this tiny, terror-filled establishment. The job posting had been almost too good to be true. $15 an hour for overnight shifts at a roadside diner. No experience necessary. Immediate start. After 3 months of unemployment and mounting bills, I wasn't about to question my luck. The place was called Millie's Diner, a squat brick building that sat like a forgotten relic along Route 44, 20 miles outside of Harrisburg. The kind of establishment that Google Maps seemed to forget existed. My name is Jordan Reeves, and I worked plenty of night shifts before. Gas stations, warehouse inventory, even a stint as a hotel desk clerk. I knew the drill. Fighting sleep, dealing with the occasional drunk or weirdo, counting down the hours until dawn. Nothing I couldn't handle, or so I thought. I arrived for my first shift at 10:45 on a Tuesday night, 15 minutes early like any responsible employee. The diner's neon sign flickered weakly against the October darkness, casting sickly pink shadows across the empty parking lot. Only 2 other vehicles sat in the gravel. A beat-up Toyota that probably belonged to the evening shift worker, and an ancient Buick that looked like it hadn't moved in years. The woman training me was named Rita, a heavy-set lady in her 60s with tired eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. She barely looked at me when I walked in, just gestured to the stool beside the cash register. "You're the new night worker," she said. It wasn't a question. Jordan Reeves. "Nice to meet you." She made a sound that might have been acknowledgement and stubbed out her cigarette in a coffee cup. The diner was exactly what you'd expect. A dozen vinyl booths along the windows, a long counter with rotating stools, checkered linoleum that had probably been installed in the 70s. Everything smelled like old grease and burnt coffee. "Listen close, because I'm only saying this once," Rita began, pulling a laminated card from beneath the register. "This ain't a normal place. The owner, Mr. Dietrich, he's got specific rules for the night shift. You follow them exactly, you'll be fine. You don't." She trailed off, her eyes finally meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "Well, just follow them." She slid the card across the counter. It was yellowed with age, the corners worn smooth from handling. At the top, in faded typewriter font, it read, "Night shift protocol, mandatory compliance." I laughed nervously. Is this some kind of hazing thing? Rita didn't smile. "Read them. Memorize them. Your life depends on it." Something in her voice killed my amusement. I picked up the card and read, "Rule 1. Between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., the diner must never be completely empty. If you're the only person present, you must place the photograph from the office face-up on table 7 before midnight. Rule 2. Do not acknowledge or respond to anyone who enters without triggering the door chime. If you see them, look away immediately. Rule 3. If the jukebox plays on its own, let it finish the entire song. Do not approach it. Do not unplug it. Rule 4. The bathroom at the end of the hall is off limits between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Place the out-of-order sign on the door at 1:55 a.m. Do not remove it until 3:05 a.m. Rule 5. If you hear footsteps from the kitchen when no one is there, continue your work. Do not investigate. They will stop on their own. Rule 6. Never look directly at the reflection in the large mirror behind the counter after midnight. Use your peripheral vision only. I read through them twice, then looked up at Rita. This is a joke, right? Some kind of local folklore thing to scare the new person. Does it look like I'm joking? Rita's voice was flat, emotionless. I worked nights here for 12 years. I followed those rules every single shift. The 2 people before me who didn't take them seriously. She paused, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. One quit after a week, won't talk about what happened. The other ended up at Harrisburg Psychiatric and hasn't spoken a coherent sentence in 6 months. The fluorescent lights above us flickered, and I felt the temperature in the diner drop several degrees. Rita continued her orientation as if nothing had happened, showing me how to work the ancient cash register, where the cleaning supplies were kept, how to prep the coffee maker for the morning rush. But my eyes kept drifting back to that laminated card, now sitting beside the register like a coiled snake. At 11:15, Rita gathered her belongings and headed for the door. She paused with her hand on a handle, looking back at me with something that might have been pity. "The photograph is in the office, first drawer on the left. Don't forget." Then she was gone, and I was alone. The silence that followed her departure was oppressive. I never noticed how many sound a commercial refrigerator makes, how loudly a clock ticks, how the building itself seems to breathe and settle. I busied myself with wiping down the counter, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me like a burial shroud. At 11:40, I remembered the photograph. Rule 1 had been specific about the time, before midnight. I found the office easily enough, a cramped room that smelled like mildew and old paper. The desk was metal and institutional, covered with scattered receipts and supply invoices. I opened the first drawer on the left. The photograph was face down, and even though I knew I needed to look at it, some primal part of my brain screamed at me to leave it alone. I picked it up and flipped it over. It was an old Polaroid, the colors faded and slightly blurred. It showed the interior of the diner, this very diner, but from decades ago based on the clothing of the people visible. A family sat in one of the booths, a man, a woman, and a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They were smiling at the camera, the picture of wholesome Americana. But something about it felt wrong. The more I looked at it, the more I noticed the oddities. The father's smile was too wide, stretching his face in a way that didn't look quite human. The mother's eyes were completely black, no whites visible at all. And the little girl, she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking directly at me, through time and space, with an expression of pure malevolence. I nearly dropped the photograph. My hands trembled as I carried it out to the main dining area. Table 7 was the booth in the far corner, the one with the torn vinyl that Rita had pointed out earlier as needing repair. I placed the photograph face up on the table, and immediately the oppressive feeling in the diner lessened, as if something had been satisfied. The clock behind the counter clicked over to midnight. That's when I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from the kitchen, like something heavy being dragged across the tile floor. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. The kitchen was supposed to be empty. I'd locked the back door myself after Rita left, had watched her check all the appliances to make sure nothing was left on. The scraping continued, steady and rhythmic, then stopped, then started again, closer this time. Rule 5 echoed in my mind. If you hear footsteps from the kitchen when no one is there, continue your work. Do not investigate. They will stop on their own. But this wasn't footsteps. This was something else. Did the same rule apply? I stood behind the counter, my entire body rigid with fear, as the scraping grew louder. Whatever was making the sound was right on the other side of the swinging kitchen door now. I could see the door itself trembling slightly, as if something massive was pressing against it from the other side. Then silence. Complete and total silence. I waited, barely breathing, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Nothing happened. The door remained closed. The kitchen remained silent. Slowly, carefully, I let out the breath I'd been holding. That's when the door chime rang. I spun around, relief flooding through me. A customer. Another human being. I wasn't alone anymore. Thank God. But the door hadn't opened. The chime had rung, but the door was still closed, the parking lot beyond it empty and dark. And then I saw him. A man stood in the middle of the diner, between me and the entrance. He was just there, as if he'd materialized from nothing. He wore a flannel shirt and work boots, his face weathered and familiar in that generic way that all middle-aged working men in rural Pennsylvania seem to share. He was smiling at me, waiting for service. But the door chime had rung. I'd heard it, which meant Rule 2 crashed into my consciousness like a freight train. Do not acknowledge or respond to anyone who enters without triggering the door chime. If you see them, look away immediately. I tore my gaze away from the man, my heart racing. From the corner of my eye, I could see him still standing there, motionless now, waiting. I grabbed a cleaning cloth and started wiping down the already clean counter, keeping my eyes fixed on the Formica surface, fighting every instinct that screamed at me to look up, to acknowledge him, to ask what he wanted. Minutes passed. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in my peripheral vision, a silent presence that radiated wrongness. Then, without any warning, he was gone. I risked a glance up. The diner was empty again, but on the floor where he'd been standing was a dark stain, like old blood that had soaked into the linoleum years ago. A stain I was absolutely certain hadn't been there before. The hours between midnight and 2 a.m. passed in a state of surreal tension. Every creak of the building, every hiss of the heating system, every distant sound from the highway made me jump. I convinced myself that what I'd seen was just my imagination, stress from the new job, maybe some kind of waking nightmare brought on by Rita's ominous warnings. But that stain on the floor remained, and no amount of rational explanation could make it disappear. I kept busy. That was the key, I decided. Keep moving, keep working, don't give yourself time to think too much. I cleaned the coffee maker, restocked the napkin dispensers, reorganized the condiment station. Normal tasks, mundane tasks, the kind of mindless work that had always helped me get through long nights before. At 1:45, I was refilling the salt shakers when I noticed the time. Rule 4 specified that I needed to place the out-of-order sign on the bathroom door at 1:55. I had 10 minutes. Rita had shown me where the sign was kept, in a utility closet near the bathrooms, along with cleaning supplies and spare toilet paper. The hallway that led to the restrooms was narrow and poorly lit, the fluorescent tube at the far end flickering in that maddening way that suggested it would burn out completely at any moment. The men's room was on the left, the women's on the right, and at the very end of the hall was a third door, unmarked and slightly larger than the others. That was the one I needed to worry about. I retrieved the sign, a simple plastic placard that hooked over the doorknob. As I approached the end of the hall, I noticed something odd. The door wasn't quite closed. There was a gap of maybe an inch, and from that gap came a sound, breathing, heavy, labored breathing, like someone who just run a marathon. My hand froze halfway to the doorknob. Rule 4 said the bathroom was off limits between 2 and 3 a.m., but it was only 1:50. I still had time. Was someone in there? But Rita had been clear. I was the only person scheduled for the night shift. The diner should be empty except for me. The breathing grew louder, more strained. Then I heard something else, a wet, sliding sound, like meat being dragged across tile. It was coming from inside the bathroom, beyond that slightly open door. Every horror movie I'd ever watched screamed at me to run, to get away from that door. But a different instinct, the one that had gotten me through tough situations before, told me I needed to close that door, needed to put up the sign, needed to follow the rules exactly as written. I reached out with a trembling hand and pushed the door closed. The breathing stopped instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch. I quickly hung the sign over the doorknob, my fingers fumbling with the plastic. The clock on my phone read 1:56. I cut it close, but I'd made it. As I turned to head back to the main dining area, I heard a soft thump from behind the door, then another, then a series of rapid thuds, like someone pounding on the door from the inside. But the door itself didn't move, didn't rattle. The sound was there, impossible to ignore, but the door remained perfectly still. I walked quickly back to the counter, my legs feeling like rubber. The thuds continued for another minute, then stopped as abruptly as they'd started. The clock read 2:01. I had an hour to wait before I could remove the sign. That's when the jukebox started playing. I hadn't noticed it before, tucked as it was in the corner near the restroom's hallway. It was one of those vintage Wurlitzer models, all chrome and colored lights, probably worth a fortune to collectors. The lights flickered to life, cycling through their programmed sequence of reds and blues and yellows. Then music began to pour from the speakers. It was an old song, something from the 50s based on the crooning vocals and orchestral backing. I didn't recognize it, but there was something deeply unsettling about hearing it in an empty diner at 2 in the morning. The singer's voice had a tinny, distant quality, as if the recording had degraded over decades of play. Rule 3 was explicit. If the jukebox plays on its own, let finish the entire song. Do not approach it. Do not unplug it. I stood behind the counter and listened. The song was about lost love, as so many of those old songs were. But the lyrics had a darker edge to them. Something about waiting in shadows, about promises that transcended death, about love that refused to let go even when it should. The singer's voice rose and fell with theatrical emotion, and I found myself listening despite my fear, drawn into the melancholy narrative. Then I noticed something wrong. The song should have been winding down. I could feel it reaching its natural conclusion, but instead, it started over. The exact same intro, the same first verse, as if someone had hit repeat. But no one had touched the jukebox. My stomach tightened. Was this still the same song? Did the rule mean I had to wait for it to finish naturally? Or did this count as a loop that might go on forever? The listing beneath the jukebox's selection window showed only one song queued, but it kept playing, starting over again each time it should have ended. I checked my phone. 2:17, 43 minutes until I could remove the bathroom sign. And this song showed no signs of stopping. The third repetition began, and I noticed something new. The singer's voice had changed slightly. It was deeper now, more menacing. The words were the same, but the delivery had shifted from melancholy to threatening. And underneath the music, barely audible, I could hear something else. Whispering. Multiple voices whispering in a language I didn't recognize, their words weaving between the notes like audio corruption. The fourth repetition started, and the whispering grew louder. The singer's voice had become distorted, stretched, as if the tape was playing at the wrong speed. I could make out some of the whispered words now, and they sent ice through my veins. Look at us. Turn around. We've been waiting. Look at us. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, focused on the menu board behind the counter. Rule 2 had said not to acknowledge certain presences. Maybe this was related. Maybe if I looked at the jukebox, something would happen. The fifth repetition was barely recognizable as music anymore. The singer's voice had become a distorted growl, the instruments a cacophony of discordant noise. The whispering was a chorus now, dozens of voices overlapping, all saying the same thing. Look at us. Then mercifully it stopped, not faded out, not wound down, just stopped mid-word as if someone had yanked the plug. The jukebox lights went dark, and silence returned to the diner. I checked the time. 2:39. 21 minutes until I could deal with the bathroom sign. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I needed to ground myself, to do something normal. I decided to make coffee. Not because I needed it, my nerves were already jangling, but because it was something ordinary, something I could control. As I worked the coffee maker, going through the familiar motions of measuring grounds and pouring water, I felt my heart rate slowly returning to normal. This was manageable, I told myself. Strange, yes. Unsettling, absolutely. But manageable. I just had to follow the rules. That's all Rita had said. Follow the rules, and I'd be fine. The coffee began to percolate, filling the diner with its rich aroma. For the first time since my shift began, I felt a small measure of comfort. I could do this. 5 more hours until dawn. I could make it. That's when I made my first mistake. I glanced up at the large mirror behind the counter. the one that reflected the entire diner. Just a quick look, barely a second, my eyes drawn there by habit more than intention. But it was after midnight, and Rule 6 had been very clear. Never look directly at the reflection in the large mirror behind the counter after midnight. Use your peripheral vision only. The moment my eyes focused on the mirror, I saw them. The diner was full. Every booth occupied. Every stool at the counter taken. Dozens of people sat throughout the space. All of them perfectly still. All of them staring directly at me. I recognized some of them. The man in the flannel shirt who'd appeared earlier, now sitting in booth 3. A woman in a waitress uniform from decades past, standing near the kitchen door. The little girl from the photograph, sitting alone in booth 7, the picture still face up on the table in front of her. But it was the figure seated directly in front of me, on the other side of the counter where no one should have been, that made my blood run cold. It was me, or something wearing my face. It sat on a stool I knew was empty, grinning at me with my own features twisted into an expression of pure malice. I tore my eyes away from the mirror, my breath coming in short gasps. When I looked at the actual diner, at the real space around me, it was empty. No people, no crowds, just the ordinary, quiet dining room. But I could feel them now, could sense their presence all around me. The air had become thick, oppressive, charged with hostile energy. The coffee maker sputtered and hissed, drawing my attention. The pot was full, but the coffee inside was black as tar, thicker than it should have been. And floating on its surface was something that looked disturbingly like blood, swirling in patterns that seemed almost intentional. 3 a.m. I needed to remove the bathroom sign, but I couldn't move. My body felt frozen, pinned in place by the weight of unseen eyes watching me from all directions. The temperature in the diner had dropped dramatically. I could see my breath now, small clouds of vapor with each exhale. A sound emerged from the hallway. Scratching. Long, deliberate scraping sounds like fingernails on wood. The bathroom door was being clawed from the inside, and I knew with absolute certainty that if I didn't remove that sign at exactly 3:05, something terrible would happen. I forced my legs to move, one step at a time, each movement requiring tremendous effort. The air felt like molasses, resistant, trying to hold me back. The scratching grew more frantic as I approached. The door was vibrating now, bulging outward slightly, as whatever was inside threw itself against it. 3:03. 2 minutes. I stood in front of the door, my hand outstretched toward the sign. The scratching stopped. Everything stopped. The only sound was my own labored breathing and the pounding of my heart. 3:04. 1 minute. The silence was worse than the noise. I could feel something on the other side of the door, something massive and patient, waiting for the precise moment when the rules would allow it to act. 3:05. I grabbed the sign and yanked it free. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps inside the bathroom, slow and measured, walking away from the door, toward the back of the bathroom. Then silence again. I didn't wait to see if anything else would happen. I walked back to the counter as quickly as I dared without actually running, hung the sign back in its place in the utility closet, and resumed my position behind the register. The clock read 3:27 a.m., and the diner felt different now. Not better, just different. The oppressive weight had lifted slightly, as if whatever forces held sway here had retreated to regroup. I knew better than to feel relieved. The night was far from over, and I'd already broken one of the rules, even if only for a second. That glance in the mirror haunted me. The image of all those figures, those things wearing human shapes, sitting throughout the diner as if they'd never left. And the one wearing my face, grinning at me with knowledge of something I couldn't comprehend. I kept my eyes carefully away from the mirror now, using only my peripheral vision as instructed, but I could feel it there. That reflective surface, like a window into something that should have remained hidden. I try to focus on mundane tasks again. Inventory check. Rita had left me a clipboard with a list of supplies to count. Napkins, coffee filters, sugar packets, creamer cups. I moved methodically through the diner, counting and recording, keeping my mind occupied with numbers and check marks. That's when I noticed the photograph was no longer on table 7. My blood ran cold. I'd placed it there myself before midnight, following Rule 1 exactly as written. It had been face up on the table, clearly visible. But now the table was empty except for the usual condiment caddy and a faint ring where someone's coffee cup had sat long ago. I searched the booth, checking under the table, in the seats, even on the floor. Nothing. The photograph had vanished, which meant Rule 1 had been violated. Not by my action, but violated nonetheless. And if the rules could be broken by forces outside my control, what did that mean for the protection they supposedly offered? A soft giggle echoed through the diner. High-pitched, childlike, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spun around, my eyes scanning the empty booths. There, in the far corner where table 7 sat, I saw movement in shadows. Something small, child-sized, slipping between the booth seats. "Hello." My voice came out as a whisper. I immediately regretted speaking. The rules hadn't said anything about not talking, but instinct told me that drawing attention to myself was a mistake. The giggling came again, closer now. I could track it moving through the diner, weaving between tables, always just out of direct sight. The little girl from the photograph. It had to be. But what did she want? I backed toward the counter, my hand fumbling for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around the coffee pot, still full of that too dark liquid. Not much of a defense, but better than nothing. The giggling stopped. The diner fell silent again, but this silence was different from before. It was anticipatory, like the moment before a thunderclap. Something was about to happen. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. When they came back to full brightness, she was standing in the middle of the diner. The little girl from the photograph, wearing the same dress, the same shoes, everything exactly as it had appeared in that faded Polaroid, except for her eyes. Her eyes were completely black, reflecting no light, and they were fixed directly on me. She smiled, and her teeth were too sharp, too numerous, filling her mouth in rows like a shark. When she spoke, her voice was wrong, layered with multiple tones as if several people were speaking in unison. "You looked. You weren't supposed to look." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Every muscle in my body had locked up, frozen by pure primal terror. She took a step toward me, then another. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, like stop-motion animation. Between each step, she seemed to flicker, appearing several feet closer than she should have been able to move in that time. The mirror shows truth. The mirror shows us. We're always here, always watching, always waiting. Another step. She was only 10 feet away now. I could smell something rotten, like decaying flowers mixed with old meat. The smell intensified with each step she took. "Do you want to see again? Do you want to see all of us?" My paralysis broke. I stumbled backward, putting the counter between us. She laughed, that same high-pitched giggle, and pointed toward the large mirror behind me. "Look again. Look and see what you've invited in." "No." My voice was barely audible. "I'm not looking. I'm following the rules." Her smile widened impossibly, threatening to split her face in half. "Too late. You already broke them. The mirror remembers. We remember." She raised her hand, pointing one finger toward the mirror, and I felt a compulsion wash over me. An overwhelming urge to turn around, to look into that reflective surface, to see whatever horror she wanted me to see. I gripped the counter edge so hard my knuckles turned white, fighting the compulsion with everything I had. "Look, look, look." Her voice was a chant now, growing louder, more insistent. Then, salvation came from an unexpected source. The door chime rang. A real customer, someone substantial enough to trigger the actual mechanism. The little girl vanished instantly, like smoke dispersed by wind. The compulsion evaporated. I looked toward the entrance, nearly sobbing with relief. A trucker stood in the doorway, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and tired eyes. He looked completely normal, wonderfully mundane, blessedly real. "You open?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. Yes, absolutely. Come in, please. I've never been so happy to see another human being in my entire life." He settled onto a stool at the counter, several seats away from where I stood. "Coffee black. And if you've got any pie left, I'll take a slice. Don't care what kind." My hand shook as I poured his coffee. Using a fresh pot, I quickly brewed, refusing to touch the corrupted one from earlier. "Cherry okay? It's the only kind we have out." "Perfect." I served him, watching as he wrapped his hands around the mug and took a long sip. Just a normal customer, a normal transaction. The supernatural atmosphere that had dominated the diner seemed to have retreated completely. The temperature had returned to normal. The oppressive feeling was gone. "Rough night?" the trucker asked, gesturing to my shaking hands. "You could say that. First night on the job. Still getting used to things." He chuckled. "Night shift at a place like this. You see all kinds of weird stuff. Your mind plays tricks when it's just you and the dark. I've been driving routes through here for 15 years. Always something strange about this stretch of road." "What kind of strange?" I asked, desperate for any information that might help me understand what I was experiencing. He took another sip of coffee, considering his words carefully. "A lot of accidents on this road. A lot of deaths. Place has history, you know. Bad history. This diner's been here since the 50s. Built on land that was never quite right. If you listen to the old-timers." "What happened here?" The trucker's expression darkened. "You really want to know? Or are you better off not knowing?" "I need to know. Please." He sighed, cutting into his pie with his fork. "Back in the 60s, there was a family that ran this place. The Dietrichs. Mother, father, and a little girl. One night in winter, something happened. Nobody knows exactly what, but come morning, all three of them were dead. Murder-suicide, the police said. Father killed his wife and daughter, then himself. But the scene was so bad, so wrong, that the cops who investigated it wouldn't talk about it. Two of them quit the force shortly after. The little girl. The photograph. It was starting to make horrible sense. The place has changed hands a dozen times since then." The trucker continued. "Never stays closed long. Always someone willing to reopen it. And always someone willing to work nights, despite the stories." "What stories?" "That the family never left. That they're still here, still serving customers, still going through the motions. That the rules aren't about keeping something out. They're about keeping something in." A chill ran down my spine. "The rules. You know about the rules." He nodded slowly. "Everyone who drives this route knows about them. We don't talk about it much, but we know. And we know that the night shift workers either learn real fast, or they don't last." He finished his pie and drained his coffee. "My advice: follow those rules to the letter. Don't question them. Don't try to understand them. Just follow them." He stood, pulling out his wallet. I waved him off. "On the house. Please." "You sure?" "I'm sure. Thank you for being real." He gave me a strange look, but didn't question it. "You take care of yourself, kid. And remember, don't trust anything you see in the mirror. That one's the most important." He headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. If the little girl appears again, don't talk to her. Don't acknowledge her. She feeds on attention. Starve her, and she'll lose interest." Then he was gone, the door chime marking his departure. I was alone again. The clock read 4:19 a.m., less than 2 hours until dawn. The trucker's words echoed in my mind as I stood behind the counter, acutely aware of the mirror on my back. The family never left. They're still here. The rules aren't about keeping something out. They're about keeping something in. I understood now, or at least I thought I did. This wasn't a haunting in the traditional sense. This was something worse. The Dietrich family hadn't just died here. They'd been trapped here, their deaths so violent and wrong that they'd become embedded in the very fabric of the building. And the rules weren't protection. They were a containment protocol, a way to maintain the barrier between the living and the dead, to keep both sides in their proper places. The photograph being missing troubled me deeply. Rule 1 specified that it needed to be on table 7 between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. But it was gone, and I had no way to replace it. Did that mean the containment was breaking down? Or had I already failed without realizing it? I decided to search for the photograph. Maybe it had fallen on the floor, slipped under the booth somehow. I grabbed a flashlight from behind the counter and approached table 7 cautiously. The booth looked ordinary enough in the beam of my flashlight. The torn vinyl seat, the scratched Formica table, the slightly crooked condiment caddy. I got down on my hands and knees and searched under the table. Nothing but dust and a few petrified French fries that had probably been there for months. As I stood up, something caught my eye. There, on the wall beside the booth, was something I hadn't noticed before. Scratches, deep gouges in the paneling, arranged in a pattern. It took me a moment to realize they formed letters, crude and uneven, but readable. Help US, trap can't leave the mirror, holds US. My hand trembled as I traced the letters with my finger. The scratches were old, the edges smoothed by time. How long had this message been here? And who had carved it? One of the previous night shift workers? Or something else? The sound from the kitchen made me jump. Not the scraping from earlier. This was different. Pots and pans clattering, as if someone was cooking. I smelled something too. Bacon frying, coffee brewing, toast burning. Breakfast smells. But it was 4:30 in the morning, and I was alone. Rule 5. If you hear footsteps from the kitchen when no one is there, continue your work. Do not investigate. But these weren't footsteps. These are cooking sounds. Did the rules still apply? Or was this something else? Something the rules hadn't accounted for? The kitchen door swung open. A woman emerged, wearing a waitress uniform from the 1960s. A pink dress with white piping. A small paper hat pinned to her bouffant hairstyle. A name tag that read Betty. She carried a plate of eggs and bacon, steaming hot, impossibly fresh. She moved with purpose toward the counter, set the plate down in front of where I stood, and smiled at me. Your breakfast, dear. You must be hungry. Her voice was warm, maternal, exactly what you'd expect from a small-town waitress. But her eyes were wrong. They had a glassy, unfocused quality, like a doll's eyes. And when she smiled, her expression didn't quite reach those eyes. I didn't know what to do. The rules hadn't mentioned this. Should I acknowledge her? The door chime hadn't rung, but she'd come from inside the building, not from outside. Did Rule 2 apply? I'm not hungry. Thank you. The words came out automatically, polite refusal born from years of social conditioning. Her smile didn't waver. Nonsense. You've been working so hard. You need to keep your strength up. Go on, eat. The food looked perfect. The eggs were cooked just right, the bacon crispy, the toast golden brown. My stomach growled despite my fear. I hadn't eaten since before my shift started, and the smell was intoxicating. I reached for the fork beside the plate. My hand was inches from it when I noticed something. The reflection in the stainless steel napkin dispenser beside the plate showed something different. In that warped, curved reflection, the food wasn't food at all. It was writhing, covered in maggots, rotting and putrid. And the woman wasn't a woman. She was a skeletal figure, her flesh hanging in strips from her bones, her uniform stained with ancient blood. I jerked my hand back. No, I can't. The woman's expression flickered. For just a moment, her pleasant mask slipped, and I saw something beneath it. Rage, hunger, desperation. Then the mask was back in place. You're being rude, dear. I made this especially for you. I appreciate it, but I'm not allowed to eat during my shift. Company policy. I was lying, improvising, saying anything to avoid touching that food. She stood there for a long moment, motionless, the plate still in front of me. Then she picked it up, turned, and walked back toward the kitchen. But she didn't walk normally. She glided, her feet not quite touching the floor, moving backwards while still facing forward. The kitchen door swung open on its own, and she disappeared into the darkness beyond. The moment she was gone, the breakfast smells vanished. The air was just stale grease and old coffee again. I checked the napkin dispenser's reflection. It showed nothing unusual now, just a normal distorted view of the counter. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me nearly jump out of my skin. A text message from an unknown number. Don't eat anything they offer you. Don't accept anything from them. They're trying to make you one of them. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Who had sent this? How did they have my number? I tried to reply, but the message failed to send. When I checked the conversation thread, the original message had disappeared as if it had never existed. But the warning made sense. The trucker had said the family was trapped here, still going through the motions. If they could make me eat their food, drink their coffee, accept something from them, maybe that was how they trapped me too. Maybe that was how they got the others. The ones who didn't last, the ones who ended up in psychiatric wards or simply vanished. The lights flickered again, and I heard that familiar giggling. The little girl was back. But this time, I followed the trucker's advice. I didn't look for her, didn't acknowledge the sound, just continued with my work, wiping down the counter that was already clean, refilling sugar dispensers that were already full. The giggling grew frustrated, more insistent. I could feel her moving through the diner, circling me, trying to get my attention. Objects moved in my peripheral vision. Salt shakers sliding across tables. Menus flipping open. The jukebox lights flickering on and off. But I kept my eyes on my work, my movements deliberate and focused. Look at me. Her voice was directly behind me now, so close I could feel cold breath on my neck. Why won't you look at me? I remained silent, continued wiping the counter. My hand was shaking, but I didn't stop, didn't turn around. Look at me. The voice was no longer childlike. It was something ancient and furious, layered with harmonics that hurt my ears. The temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the windows. The lights dimmed until only emergency lighting remained. Still, I didn't turn, didn't acknowledge, just kept working. A scream of rage echoed through the diner, so loud I thought my eardrums might burst. Then silence. When the lights came back up and the temperature normalized, she was gone. I'd survived the encounter by simply refusing to play her game. 4:57 a.m., 1 hour until dawn. I was going to make it. That's when I heard the front door open. The chime rang clearly, announcing a legitimate arrival. I looked up, expecting another trucker, another blessed normal human being. It was Rita. She stood in the doorway, her coat pulled tight against the October cold, her eyes sweeping the diner with practiced efficiency. When her gaze landed on me, I saw something in her expression. Relief, maybe, or surprise. You're still here, she said, walking toward the counter. Where else would I be? My shift isn't over yet. She studied me carefully. How was your night? I didn't know how to answer that. How could I explain what I'd experienced? Would she even believe me? Then I remembered. She'd worked here for 12 years. She knew. Of course she knew. The photograph disappeared from table 7. Rita's face went pale. When? Sometime around 3:30. I don't know where it went. I followed Rule 1 exactly. I put a face up on the table before midnight. But when I checked later, it was gone. She moved quickly to the office, and I heard her rummaging through drawers. She emerged a moment later with another photograph. Not the same one. This showed the diner from a different angle, different decade based on the cars visible through the window. But the same family was in it. The same man, woman, and little girl, their expressions just as wrong, just as unsettling. Rita placed it on table 7 without a word. Then she turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. This has never happened before. The photograph has never gone missing during a shift. Never. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Something's changing. The rules have held for 40 years, but something's different now. What do you mean? The containment is weakening. I felt it for months, but I kept telling myself I was imagining things. The manifestations getting stronger, the violations becoming more severe. She looked at the new photograph on the table. They're testing the boundaries, seeing what they can get away with. Who are they? The Dietrichs. Rita nodded slowly. Thomas Dietrich murdered his wife Sarah and daughter Emma in February 1968. But it wasn't just murder. It was a ritual. He'd been dabbling in things he shouldn't have, trying to achieve immortality through dark means. When it went wrong, when he realized what he'd done, he killed himself. But by then it was too late. He'd already bound their souls to this place, and his death completed the binding. The mirror, I said, pieces falling into place. He used the mirrors somehow. Mirrors are doorways. Reflective surfaces, water, polished metal. They're all thresholds between worlds. Thomas used the mirror behind the counter as an anchor point. Their souls are trapped in the reflection, forced to relive their deaths over and over, unable to move on. And they hate it. They hate being trapped. They hate the living who can come and go freely. So they try to pull others in, to trap them the same way they're trapped. The rules keep them contained. The rules maintain the balance. They give the Dietrichs just enough acknowledgement to keep them satisfied, just enough presence to prevent them from becoming desperate enough to break through completely. But if the rules are violated too severely, if the balance tips too far, she trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. 5:15 a.m. 45 minutes until dawn. We stood in silence for a moment, both of us acutely aware of the presence that filled the diner. Not malevolent now, but watchful, waiting. Did I do something wrong? I asked. I followed the rules as best I could. I only looked at the mirror once, and only for a second. Could that have been enough? Rita shook her head. You did fine. Better than most first-timers. But like I said, something's changing. The photograph disappearing. That's an escalation. They've never been able to affect physical objects that directly before. A thought occurred to me, cold and terrible. How many people have worked night shifts here since 1968? Dozens. Maybe 100 or more. Most don't last more than a few shifts. The ones who do, who really commit to it, they learn to coexist with the Dietrichs. But it takes a toll. I've aged 20 years in the 12 I've been here, and I know I can't keep doing it much longer. Then why do you stay? Why does anyone stay? She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Because someone has to. If this place closes, if no one follows the rules, if the Dietrichs are left completely alone with no acknowledgement at all, they'll get strong enough to leave, to move beyond this building. And they won't stop with just this diner. They'll spread, pulling in more souls, creating more hauntings, more trapped spirits. This diner is a containment site as much as it is a restaurant. We're not just workers here. We're wardens. The weight of that revelation settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't just a job. It was a responsibility. A burden that Rita had carried for over a decade, that others had carried before her, all the way back to the first person brave or foolish enough to work here after the murders. I can't do this, I said quietly. I'm not strong enough for this. That's what I thought too, my first night. What we all think. But you made it through, Jordan. You survived. And that means something. 5:32 a.m. Dawn was coming. I could see the first hints of gray on the eastern horizon through the diner's windows. The oppressive atmosphere was already beginning to lift, the supernatural presence retreating like shadows before the sun. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, a wrongness that had nothing to do with ghosts or trapped souls. The air pressure in the diner was dropping. My ears popped. The windows rattled in their frames despite no wind outside. Rita felt it too. Get away from the mirror, she said urgently. Now. I moved quickly toward the far end of the counter, as far from the large mirror as I could get. Rita positioned herself beside me, her body tense, ready for something. The mirror began to ripple, not like water, like reality itself was becoming fluid unstable. The reflection it showed was no longer of the diner. It was somewhere else, somewhere dark and writhing, filled with shapes that hurt to look at. And stepping through from that other place, emerging from the mirror like a diver, surfacing from deep water, was Thomas Dietrich. He didn't look like the man in the photograph. That man had been ordinary, a middle-aged father with thinning hair and a weak chin. This thing wore Thomas Dietrich's shape like an ill-fitting suit. He was too tall, his proportions subtly wrong, his movements fluid in a way that suggested his bones didn't quite work like human bones should. His eyes were the worst part. They were windows into that dark, writhing place beyond the mirror, containing depths that seemed to go on forever. "You broke the rules," he said, his voice layered with harmonics that made the windows rattle. "You looked. You saw us. You invited us in." Rita stepped forward, placing herself between me and the apparition. "The night shift isn't over yet, Thomas. You're not allowed to manifest as fully until dawn breaks. Get back." He smiled, and the expression was more terrible than any scream. "The old agreements are dissolving, Rita. You felt it. The barriers are weakening. 40 years we've been trapped, following your rules, playing your games. No more. Tonight, we break free." Behind him, emerging from the mirror, came Sarah Dietrich and little Emma. They were no less horrifying than Thomas, their forms unstable and wrong, their eyes reflecting that same infinite darkness. The three of them stood together, a mockery of family unity, blocking our view of the mirror. "You can't break free," Rita said, but I heard the uncertainty in her voice. "The containment holds. The rules. Your rules are lies we allowed you to believe." Thomas interrupted. "Every night shift worker who came here, every person who followed the protocols, they weren't containing us. They were feeding us. Every acknowledgement, every act of obedience, every moment of fear, it all made us stronger. And now, finally, we're strong enough." I looked at the windows. Dawn was coming, but not fast enough. Maybe 5 more minutes until sunrise. Could we last 5 minutes against 3 entities that have been building power for 4 decades? Emma giggled, that same high-pitched sound I'd heard throughout the night, and pointed at me. "He's new. He's fresh. He has so much fear. Can we keep him, Daddy? Can we make him stay?" "No," Rita said firmly. "You can't have him. You can't have any of us. Jordan, listen to me. Don't look at the mirror. Whatever happens, don't look at it. That's how they trap you. That's how they pull you in." Thomas moved closer, gliding across the floor. "You've been an excellent warden, Rita. 12 years of faithful service. But you're tired now. Old. Worn down. Why not rest? Why not join us? We could use someone with your knowledge on this side." "Go to hell," Rita spat. "We're already there," Sarah said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was a whisper that somehow carried across the entire diner. "And we want company. We want the living to understand what we suffer. The endless loop, the constant repetition, death over and over, unable to move on, unable to escape. Why should you live when we cannot?" The temperature continued to drop. Frost spread across every surface, the counter, the tables, the windows. My breath came out in white clouds. Rita was shivering beside me, but she held her ground. "The binding was your choice, Thomas," she said. "You chose to dabble in forces you didn't understand. You chose to murder your family. You chose to tie your souls to this place. That's on you, not on us." Thomas's expression darkened. "I was trying to give us eternal life, immortality. I was trying to make us special, to transcend death itself. How was I supposed to know the ritual would trap us instead? You murdered your wife and daughter." Rita's voice cracked with anger. "You butchered them in that kitchen, and then you took your own life. You don't get to play the victim here." Emma's form flickered, and for just a moment, I saw her as she must have been in life. A normal little girl, frightened and confused, caught up in her father's madness. Then the mask returned, the predatory entity wearing a child's shape. I didn't want to die, Emma said, and there was genuine anguish in her voice beneath the supernatural harmonics. I was only 8 years old. I had my whole life ahead of me. And Daddy, her form flickered again. Daddy said we were going to be together forever. He said it wouldn't hurt. He lied. Sarah moved toward her daughter, and for a moment, I witnessed something heartbreaking. A mother trying to comfort her child, even in death, even transformed into something monstrous. Hush, Emma. Hush, sweetheart. It will be over soon. We'll be over soon. I asked, finding my voice despite my terror. Thomas turned his attention back to me. The sun rises in 4 minutes. When it does, our window closes. We return to the mirror, to our prison, to our endless suffering. Unless we claim a replacement before dawn, someone to take our place in the binding. Understanding crashed over me like ice water. That's what happened to the others, the ones who didn't last. You trapped them. Only the ones who truly violated the rules, Rita said quickly. Only the ones who accepted their offers, who ate their food, who acknowledged them fully. If you just survive until dawn, if you refuse them, you'll be fine. Will he? Thomas asked. He looked into the mirror. He saw us. That's acknowledgement enough for the binding to begin. It was only for a second, I said desperately. I looked away immediately. A second is all it takes. A moment of eye contact. A glimpse of the truth. The door opens, and we can begin the pull. Thomas extended his hand toward me. It doesn't have to be painful, Jordan. Join us. Step into the mirror. Take your place in our family. We'll be together forever, just like Emma and Sarah and I are together. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee the diner and never look back. But Rita grabbed my arm, holding me in place. Don't run. If you leave before your shift officially ends, that counts as abandonment. That breaks Rule 1. If you break the rules yourself, they can take you instantly. I don't want to die, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Then fight, Rita commanded. The sun is coming. 3 more minutes. Fight them. Emma rushed forward with impossible speed, her small hands reaching for me. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of menus. Her fingers brushed my arm, and where they touched, my skin went numb. I could feel something trying to attach itself to me. Cold tendrils of supernatural energy attempting to burrow into my flesh. Rita produced something from her coat pocket, a small leather pouch. She threw the contents, salt, I realized, directly at Emma. The girl shrieked and recoiled, her form becoming unstable, flickering between solid and translucent. Salt and iron, Rita said, pulling out a handful of iron nails from another pocket. The old protections still work. Not enough to banish them, but enough to hurt them, to drive them back. Thomas laughed. Parlor tricks. Superstitions. You think such simple things can stop us after all this time. But he didn't advance. Neither did Sarah. They were wary now, watching Rita's hands, keeping their distance. The salt and iron might not be able to destroy them, but it could clearly cause them pain. 2 minutes until sunrise. I could see the sky brightening outside, gray giving way to the first hints of pink and gold. So close. So impossibly close. You know what's really sad? Sarah said, her voice soft and poisonous. You think you'll be safe once the sun rises. You think you can walk out of here and never come back. But you've seen us now. You felt us. We're in your dreams now, Jordan. In your thoughts. Every time you close your eyes, we'll be there. Every time you see your reflection, you'll wonder if we're looking back. You'll never truly escape. She was right. I could feel it. The connection that had formed when I looked in the mirror. That thread of awareness that tied me to them now. Even if I survived the night, even if I walked out at dawn, I'd carry them with me. They'd haunt me in ways that had nothing to do with this building. There is another way, Thomas said, his tone shifting to something almost reasonable. Work the night shifts. Come back regularly. Follow the rules. Acknowledge us. Feed us with your fear and attention. but maintain the boundaries. Be her warden, like Rita was, like all the others before her. It's not freedom, but it's survival. Don't listen to him, Rita said. You don't owe them anything. But I do, I said quietly, understanding finally settling over me. That's what you meant when you said someone has to. Not just to keep them contained, but because I'm already connected to them now. If I don't come back, if I try to ignore them, they'll be able to reach me anywhere. But if I'm here, if I follow the rules, the containment works both ways. It keeps them here and keeps me safe. Rita's expression was pained. I was hoping you wouldn't understand that. I was hoping you'd just run and somehow be fine. But that's not how it works, is it? Everyone who's worked here and survived, they all came back. They all became wardens. Because once you see them, once you make that connection, you don't have a choice anymore. 1 minute, the sun was cresting the horizon, golden light beginning to stream through the eastern windows. The Dietrich family began to fade, their forms becoming translucent, the connection to the mirror pulling them back. We'll see you again, Jordan, Thomas said, his voice growing distant. Next Tuesday, same time. Don't be late. They dissolved into shadow and smoke, drawn back through the mirror into whatever dark place they inhabited. The rippling surface steadied, showing only the normal reflection of the diner once more. The temperature returned to normal. The frost melted rapidly, leaving puddles on the linoleum. 6 a.m. exactly. My shift was over. I slumped against the counter, my legs barely able to hold me up. Rita put a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. I hope maybe you'd be different, that somehow you'd get through without making that connection. How long did it take you? Before you looked, 3rd shift. I lasted 2 whole shifts before curiosity got the better of me. She smiled bitterly. 12 years ago. Feels like a lifetime. Do you ever get used to it? No, but you get better at managing the fear, and you learn their patterns, their limitations. The rules really do protect you, as long as you follow them exactly. I haven't had a truly close call in years. I thought about my apartment, my normal life, everything I had taken for granted just 12 hours ago. All of it seemed distant now, separated from me by an unbridgeable gap. I was different now, changed by what I'd witnessed, marked by entities that existed between life and death. What if I quit? What if I just never come back? Rita met my eyes. Then they'll visit you, in your dreams at first, then in reflections, then in shadows. They'll make your life a waking nightmare until you either come back or lose your mind. I've seen it happen. It's not pretty, so I'm trapped, just like they are. In a way, yes. But there are worse fates. At least you're still alive, still breathing, still part of the real world, even if you have to serve as a warden in it. And maybe, eventually, you'll help break the binding completely, set them free properly, in a way that doesn't destroy everything. Is that even possible? I don't know, but I have to believe it is. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? The morning shift crew began arriving. A cook, 2 waitresses, all of them normal people preparing for a normal day of work. They had no idea what happened in this building after they left each evening. No idea that the diner they served pancakes and coffee and was built on suffering and sustained by fear. I gathered my things, preparing to leave. Before I reached the door, Rita called out to me. Jordan, you did good tonight. Really good. Most first-timers break multiple rules. You only made 1 mistake, and you recovered well. I think you might actually survive this. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's the best I can offer. I stepped out into the dawn, breathing in the cold October air. Behind me, the diner looked innocent in the morning light. Just a small roadside restaurant, the kind you'd pass 100 times without a second thought. No hint of the horror it contained, the souls trapped within its walls, the supernatural prison maintained by minimum wage workers and a set of arcane rules. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. See you Tuesday night. Don't forget the photograph. Emma. I looked at the message for a long moment, then put my phone away. Tuesday was 5 days from now. 5 days to process what had happened. 5 days to try to return to normal life, knowing it would never truly be normal again. 5 days to prepare myself to return to Millie's Diner and take my place as its newest warden. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The diner was receding into the distance, but I could see something in my reflection. Just for a moment, overlaid on my own features, a little girl with black eyes, smiling. Then she was gone, and I saw only myself, pale and haunted and irrevocably changed. I thought I knew what a tough night shift was. I was wrong, but I'd learned, and I would return because I had no choice. Because someone has to maintain the containment. Someone has to follow the rules. Someone has to keep the Dietrich family trapped in their mirror prison, preventing them from spreading their suffering to the wider world. That someone, apparently, was me now. The rules would be waiting on Tuesday night. 6 simple rules that meant the difference between survival and being trapped forever in a reflection, reliving death over and over for eternity. I would follow them. I would survive. And maybe, somehow, I'd find a way to break the cycle completely. But until then, I was a warden at Millie's Diner, bound to a tiny restaurant in rural Pennsylvania by supernatural forces I barely understood. My nights belonged to the dead now, and all I could do was follow the rules and pray that dawn would always come. The sun climbed higher in the sky as I drove home, but I couldn't shake the chill that had settled into my bones. Some cold goes deeper than flesh. Some darkness can't be dispelled by light, and some jobs, once accepted, can never truly be quit. I would return on Tuesday. I had to. The Dietrichs would be waiting, trapped in their mirror, counting down the hours until night fell again and another soul entered their domain. And I would follow the rules, maintain the containment, and survive another shift at the haunted diner that the world had forgotten, but that would never forget me. Because that's what wardens do. We survive. We endure. We keep the darkness contained, one night shift at a time. And we never, ever look directly in the mirror after midnight.